Sharp Game here, coming at you with another video from ChooseYourRelationships.com off of Love Can't Wait, which can be found on Amazon.com. And somebody brought an article to my attention, and they were basically talking about white folks not having empathy for brown people, especially black people. And you know, these types of articles, these types of studies, it's been proven by Harvard University years ago, like 10 years ago. Someone brought this to my attention, where it's like they've proven at Harvard that the majority of white folks don't have empathy and compassion for blacks and brown people, for the rest of us, basically. So I'm not surprised when I saw this on psychologytoday.com. Somebody sent this over to me. And, you know, a couple of days ago, I made a couple of videos talking about being in a relationship and living in Japan, and why most relationships fail in Japan. And the number one reason is because they lack compassion. They don't have empathy for men, foreign men, or non-Japanese men. And you have to understand, it's very difficult to be in a relationship and to live with somebody that don't have compassion and empathy for somebody. And most people, including myself, I don't want to be friends, and I don't want to spend a lot of time around people that don't have empathy for me, people that can't understand where I'm coming from, people that just don't get it, people that if I'm down, if somebody died in my family, or if I had a hard day's work, or maybe I got mistreated, maybe I got in an accident, maybe I had a run in with a cop. And when I come home or call somebody and tell them my story, and the person justifies why that happened to me, you know, that's a very difficult situation and relationship to be in with somebody like that. But I'm gonna get in a little bit of this. This guy, he's I guess he's a psychologist, PhD, and this is what he wrote. On this Martin Luther King holiday, I will address a phenomenon that is often mislabeled as white guilt. Though his advocacy of nonviolent civil rights activism, Dr. King sought empathy, understanding, and respect. These were the necessary precursors to white acceptance of blacks as fully equal. And he goes on to say, he said, I was there. I saw it. Schools were segregated, of course, but so was the dentist's office. White and colored waiting rooms. The movie theater. Whites sat downstairs and blacks sat in the balcony. And pretty much everything else. Drinking fountains, restrooms, public transportation, and that's if black people were lucky. Some public accommodations were denied to them entirely. So I guess this guy was around in the 60s during the civil rights movement. And he's basically writing down his experiences growing up. And he said, I think most white people of goodwill feel empathy toward black people. Empathy, unlike guilt or pity, requires a you're like me assessment, because empathy implies that I can identify with your situation and know how I would feel if I were in your shoes. And unless I have personally behaved badly, I have no reason to feel shame. That's very important, what he just said. So white people recognize that your empathy with the struggle of others is a good thing. It's a mark of character, which Dr. King would have appreciated. And black people maybe cut us some slack. We're still trying to get this dance right. And you know we don't have any rhythm. Hell no, I ain't cutting you no slack. No free lunch, baby. And he said one more, in his small town where he lived, it would have been unthinkable for a black person to ask to use the restroom in the store. Imagine a mother, children in town trying to do her Saturday shopping with no restroom access for any of them, even in emergency. The courthouse had colored restrooms, but on Saturday it was closed. So that's what this guy, right? He's a psychologist, and he just basically wrote about his experiences during the civil rights movement while Dr. King was getting gunned down, basically, after the fact. And in this article, it's a study from the University of Toronto, where they say white people lack empathy for brown people. White people's mirror neutron system fires much less, if at all, when they watch people of color performing motor tasks. And I'm not at all surprised. For years, I just assumed that this was true and that someone just had to do a study to prove it. Okay. After the United States invaded Iraq and massacred tens of thousands of Iraqis, worldwide terrorist recruitment skyrocketed, as well as terrorist attacks targeting the U.S. and coalition countries. Terrorist leaders cited the Iraqi invasion and the deaths of Iraqis as the reason for the attacks. However, white Americans did not buy it, believing it to be a smokescreen for some other reason. It must be Islam, they reason, as they grasp at straws. And he goes on to say that I then realized that the vast majority of white Americans could not empathize with brown people at a very basic level. For most white Americans, the death and violence of thousands of brown bodies was just part of some abstract ethical argument to position oneself as morally superior to the United States. That's very important. What was just said. For most white Americans, brown people dying just meant flickers on the television screen about something happening far away. They didn't feel the overwhelming anger and sadness they would normally feel when someone they knew dies without reason. They couldn't see the full reality of what death means when the people who die are brown. That's very important. I have seen white people complain online that they cannot see the facial expression of East Asian faces. For many white people, East Asians are like emotionless robots who are efficient at machine-like things like number crunching. Some white people argue that while East Asians may be able to play musical instruments beautifully, they play music without soul. Most white people just don't see us as humans. When brown people die through violence, or East Asians express joy or sadness through our faces, most white people's brains just don't register the human connection between our bodies and their bodies. That's very important. It's all in the mind, as they say. When we watch movies and TV shows and read books featuring white protagonists, we have to put ourselves into some white people's shoes to understand the stories and feel the emotions of sadness, laughter, and pride. But people of color are rarely the protagonists in the media that white people watch. So they rarely or never have to imagine themselves as us. That's the white privilege. See, white people don't have to be around the rest of us. They don't have to live around the rest of us. They don't have to look at television with brown people. See, they have that privilege. We don't have it like that. This is why they have the advantage. But a lot of white people don't see it that way. They try to act like it doesn't exist, or they, deny and neglect, and they do all that bullshit. When I watch some medical shows about a white person undergoing surgery and the surgeon uses a sharp knife to break open pink skin, uses other instruments to yank out bloody tissue, or uses bloody string to sew up wounds, I can't help but squirm. My hands and arms unconsciously cover up the part of my body that corresponds to the area being operated on, as if protecting that part of my body from being penetrated by imaginary surgical instruments. From a purely rational perspective, this makes no sense. If I watch a white person being operated on from a third person perspective, why should my body react as if it is my own body being traumatized? The mirror neutrons are a theoretical construct to explain this type of basic bodily empathy in terms of neurons, brain cells, basically. So they basically talking about this study in this article, what they found out about the psychology, and along with the brain tests that they use on whites versus the rest of us, brown people or people of African descent. And I'm not surprised, because a lot of the people that come from places like China and Japan, they're very similar to Caucasian people. If you go to places like China and Japan, Vietnam, places like that, they call them East Asians, if I'm not mistaken. You're gonna find that a lot of their cultural ways of doing things and behaving, they're kind of like robots. I kind of agree with that. You might have a good point with that. They have a lot of their ways of doing things point back to the Caucasian. And it makes sense, because all of those countries I named, China, well, not so much China, but Japan, and especially Japan, is really a European colony. That's all it is. And Vietnam too. These, if you know anything about history, the United States government built Vietnam and Japan back up after the war, and they signed a peace treaty. But when they sign a peace treaty with somebody, you basically signing over your land to them. You're giving them control and access, so big businesses can come in there and exploit the goddamn people, the land, and everything else that they want, basically. But a lot of people in these other countries, especially Japan, don't see it that way. But it is what it is, So I'm not surprised, if you really look at how a lot of white folks act in America, how they act towards black people, any logical, rational thinking person after a while would say, hey, man, it has to be something going on with this shit. This shit has to be a little bit deeper than that, because a lot of white guys are very warlike. They're very violent. You know what I'm saying? If you look at if you pay attention, most altercations, most interactions between whites and blacks, as far as the males go, it's always tacky and trashy. It's very difficult to work something out with a white guy, based on my experience. Most white guys don't know how to handle situations like that. They don't know how to sit down with a black person and talk something out and iron out the differences so we can move forward. It's always kind of tacky and kind of low class situation. It's never It's almost never a good situation that I can remember where I had a run in with a white guy, and even a white woman. It's almost never went well, you know. And the only thing I just had to do was just disassociate myself and stop showing up, you know, whether it's a job situation or a personal situation. It's just never. I haven't had a lot of good situations dealing with a lot of white folks in America. I'm just saying, you know, and I'm not the only person that I know that's like that have experiences like this, you know. But hey, you tell me what you think. You know, if you like what you heard, subscribe to my channel, check out my blog, chooseyourrelationships.com. Until next time, I'm out.